"Please, just make it fast," the CEO said. The single dad pulled off his jacket and changed everything. The room smelled of antiseptic and regret, the kind of sharp, clean scent that made every breath feel like a reminder of how close life and death truly were. The CEO lay on the narrow hospital bed, pale under the harsh white lights, monitors humming like impatient witnesses. His voice, once feared in boardrooms and echoed across glass towers, now cracked into something smaller and human when he whispered, "Please, just make it fast." In that moment, as fear hollowed his powerful eyes, the single dad standing at the foot of the bed slowly reached up, pulled off his worn jacket, and revealed a truth that would change everything. Before we go any further, pause for a second. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us how deeply connected we all are, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The single dad's name was Daniel Reyes, though almost no one in the building knew it. To most people, he was just another quiet man in a faded security uniform, the kind you barely noticed as you rushed past revolving doors. He worked nights at the corporate headquarters owned by the very CEO now fighting for his life. Daniel had learned long ago how to be invisible. Life had taught him that blending into the background hurt less than standing out and being pushed back down. Daniel's mornings began before sunrise, packing lunches with careful hands, checking homework scribbled in pencil, and brushing his daughter Sophia's hair while she sleepily leaned against his chest. Sophia was 8 years old, bright-eyed, and born with a weak heart that made hospitals feel like a second home. Every shift Daniel worked, every double he accepted, was measured in medications, specialist visits, and the quiet terror of medical bills stacked like an impossible mountain on their small kitchen table. Years earlier, Daniel hadn't planned this life. He'd once worn a different jacket, one with a hospital emblem stitched over the pocket. He'd been a trauma nurse, trained to move fast, steady hands saving strangers he would never see again. But when Sophia's mother died suddenly from a brain aneurysm, Daniel's world collapsed. Grief swallowed him whole, and the weight of single parenthood combined with endless nights at the hospital finally broke him. One mistake during a chaotic shift, a moment of hesitation fueled by exhaustion, cost him his license. The hospital let him go quietly, and Daniel never fought it. He believed he deserved the fall. The CEO, Richard Hale, had built an empire on speed and precision. He believed time was the only currency that mattered, and mercy was a luxury for people who couldn't keep up. Layoffs were numbers to him, not families. Security guards were part of the furniture, not men with lives beyond the badge. Daniel had watched Richard stride through the lobby countless times, tailored suits cutting through space, eyes always fixed forward. They had never spoken, not once. The night everything changed was supposed to be ordinary. A charity gala filled the upper floors, champagne laughter echoing down marble halls. Daniel stood by the service elevator, adjusting his jacket against the cold air, thinking about Sophia's upcoming surgery and how he still hadn't figured out how to pay for it. That was when the alarm rang. Not the soft warning of a drill, but the sharp, panicked scream of a medical emergency. Richard Hale collapsed in his private office, clutching his chest as executives froze in terror. By the time paramedics arrived, his heart had slipped into a dangerous rhythm. He was rushed to the hospital, unconscious, powerful body suddenly fragile. Hours later, after emergency surgery, complications followed. Internal bleeding, dropping blood pressure, doctors moving faster than even Richard had ever demanded of his employees. Daniel followed the ambulance, not as security, but as something deeper pulling him forward. He told himself it was just concern, just instinct. Yet as he stood outside the ICU, watching doctors argue in hushed voices, something old and buried stirred inside him. They needed blood. A rare type. O negative. Universal donor. The hospital was short. Without thinking, Daniel stepped forward and offered his arm. He didn't mention his past, didn't explain how familiar the sterile hallways felt. As the needle slid into his vein, memories flooded back, nights of saving lives, of believing he mattered. The blood flowed, dark and steady, carrying with it pieces of a man who had never stopped being who he once was. Richard regained consciousness hours later, pain radiating through his body like fire. He understood enough to know he was losing the fight. Pride drained from him, replaced by raw fear. When he whispered for it to be fast, it wasn't death he feared most, but helplessness. He hated being at the mercy of others. That was when Daniel entered the room. He stood quietly at first, eyes heavy with exhaustion. The CEO barely noticed him until Daniel removed his jacket. Beneath it wasn't just a security uniform, but scars along his arms, faint lines from years of IVs, procedures, and the unmistakable posture of a medical professional. Daniel spoke softly, not with authority, but with compassion. He explained what was happening, what the doctors were doing, and why there was still hope. He spoke the language of care, not control. As minutes passed, Richard listened. Really listened. No one had ever explained things to him gently before. He learned that the man beside him was the one whose blood now ran through his veins. The security guard he'd never acknowledged had quite literally become his lifeline. Over the next days, Richard stabilized. Recovery was slow, humbling, and painful. Daniel visited during breaks, checking monitors out of habit, correcting small things nurses missed. He never asked for thanks. He just wanted to know the man would live. Somewhere between medications and long silences, Richard learned about Sophia. About the heart condition, the surgeries postponed, the fear Daniel carried like a shadow. For the first time in his life, Richard saw the cost of the world he'd built. The single dad standing before him was not weak or failed. He was strong in ways Richard had never valued. When Richard was discharged weeks later, he requested a meeting. Not in a boardroom, but in the hospital cafeteria, where sunlight streamed through tall windows. Richard offered Daniel more than money. He offered him a second chance. Legal teams helped Daniel fight to regain a restricted nursing license. The company funded Sophia's surgery quietly, without press releases or tax write-offs. Daniel returned to medicine, not as a punishment for past mistakes, but as a redemption. Months later, Daniel stood in an operating room, gloved hands steady as surgeons repaired Sophia's heart. When she woke, pale but smiling, she squeezed his finger and told him she wasn't scared anymore. Daniel cried then, openly, surrounded by machines that beat with promise instead of fear. Richard attended the follow-up appointment in a simple sweater, unrecognizable from the man he once was. He watched father and daughter laugh in the waiting room, and something inside him shifted permanently. He restructured his company policies, introduced healthcare funds, and mandated human reviews behind every decision. Employees noticed. The world noticed, though most never knew why. Now, before we reach the end, if this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and leave a heartfelt comment. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who need them most. And just before we finish, please comment the words, "Kindness Lives," below. It means more than you know. Years later, Daniel still kept his old security jacket folded in a drawer at home. Not as a reminder of hardship, but of the night everything changed. Of the moment a powerful man asked for an ending, and a broken man offered him a beginning instead. And in that quiet exchange, both of them were saved.